Civic Center next to it. The building was actually built in 1906 as the home of the American Red Cross in Key West. If you look down the lane to your right, you see the Key West Aquarium. That was the first tourist attraction built in Key West in 1934. They have 5 shows a day. You can pet a live shark. I did it a month ago. I still have nightmares. On the right, the beautiful Romanesque Revival red brick building.
That's beautiful.
Was at one time a federal courthouse and other times a customs house. Now it's a museum of art and history. Look across the street on the right. Behind those 2 cannons, you see the Mel Fisher Maritime Museum. Mel Fisher and his people, the most successful treasure hunters of all times. They found the 1622 wrecks of the Etosha and Santa Margarita in 1985. So far, they brought up over $450 million worth of gold, silver, emeralds, and other artifacts. I say so far because about 10 days ago, they found an emerald and gold ring which they valued at $500,000. I've offered them $125 cash. I'm still waiting to hear back on that. On the right coming up, you'll see some open gates. They take you up to Harry Truman's little White House. President Truman visited the island 11 times on working vacations while he was in office. The little White House has been beautifully restored and it looks great. If you're interested in President Truman going up there, as a native of Washington, D.C., I salute all our presidents. Take a look on the left. Between these short white walls in the back, you see a banyan tree. This is part of that tree. This is part of that tree. And in the third yard, this is part of that tree. It was planted in Key West 130 years ago by the Cosgrove family. The tree itself is indigenous to India and is a member of the ficus family of trees. On the corner across the street on the right is another member of the ficus family. That's a Spanish laurel tree. It is a very hardy tree, but I have too much respect for you people to do the obvious laurel and hardy joke there. On the right through the parking lot, you see the red brick building with the white trim. That's the U.S. Post Office, designed by a former 5-time mayor of Key West, Sonny McCoy. Look under the trees to the right and to the front of us. You see a number of roosters and chickens and some baby chicks there also. They're having a meeting. I'll tell you more about them a little bit later on, where you will find them all over the island. On the right, you'll see signs for the beginning of US 1 northbound. It starts at that mile 0 sign, goes 2,209 miles north to Fort Kent, Maine. You see that mile 0 sign? That's the most stolen sign in Key West. I've got 10 of them myself. Now for the kids, that was just a joke. I've only got 6 of them. On the right, this is the Marrero Guest House. Those are some Marrero guests sitting in front there. The house was built in 1878 by Francisco Marrero. Interesting story. He was a Spaniard, jailed in Cuba, bribed his way out. I didn't even know you could do that. Moved to Key West, opened up a cigar factory, did very, very well. Married a Key West girl, had 8 children. Life was good. Then one day, he died. Well, his wife was very sad, saying, "I'm sorry that my husband passed on, but at least I still have the house and the business." And that was true for another 10 days when his first wife showed up from Havana with 9 children. Excuse me. Yeah, apparently he had never bothered to divorce her, so Key West wife is kicked out, homeless and penniless. They say her ghost walks the halls of the guest house every evening, refusing to turn down the sheets, or to put a mint on anybody's pillow. Now, Old Town Key West has over 3,000 structures. Of the 3,000, over 10% are on the National Registry of Historic Places. One of the more popular styles of houses in Key West is called New England Classic Revival. That's where the second floor front is almost a mirror image of the first floor front. Now, an example that'll be coming up on the right beyond this tall hedge, you see LBB. See where the front door is and where the porch door on the second floor is? They're terrifically aligned. The windows are the same and the front porches are the same. Another version is 2 doors up the street, except this place, the front door is on the right, the porch door is on the right, the windows again are identical and the porch is the same. On the left, this is called a Conca or Bahama style house. It's got a wraparound porch, much larger windows, much higher ceiling. The first 2 houses on the left were built by a shipwrecking Captain E.C. Pierce for his 2 daughters. They each got one. They made the houses identical because he didn't want them arguing over who had the better house. On the right is the Key West branch of the Monroe County Library. The Monroe County Library is the oldest library system in Florida. It's right next to a palm tree garden with 25 varieties of palm trees. You'll notice it has a fountain and a bench. A great place to read a book. You folks remember books, don't you? Oh, good. You can read about them on your iPads and Kindles. On the left, the second building, it's called a zigzag house. See how the roof line goes up, goes down, goes up, goes down, goes up, goes down. Those low points were to capture water for a brick or concrete cistern. Until 1940, the vast majority of clean water on this island was rainwater captured in those cisterns. On the left across the street, the yellow building with the green shutters and white trim was built in 1849 as a sponge warehouse. Sponging was big business in Key West, bringing in over $1 million a year. This is an actual sponge from a Key West sponge bed. It was a great business from about 1838 till 1938. People would go out of the rowboats with a glass-bottom bucket and a rake-like instrument and pull the sponges up out of the shallow waters. In 1938, however, a red tide hit Key West, causing a bacteria that pretty much wiped out the sponge bed. Before they could make any sort of a comeback, artificial sponges came into popularity. Not only were they less expensive, but they came in colors, and who's going to turn down a pink sponge? On the left, this is the Thomas Thompson family home built in 1880, just recently restored in great shape. On the right, if you look up this driveway, you'll see a red tree with peeling bark. That's called the Gumbo Limbo tree. Sometimes it's nicknamed the tourist tree because when tourists aren't careful, they get a red peeling bark. On the left, believe it or not, coming up, another member of the ficus family. This is a rubber tree. This one is so big, it's got its own mailbox. It's doing so well, it's got its own boat. Okay, I'm a little jealous. On the left, these are my favorite palm trees on the island. Against the building here, they're called traveler palms. They usually grow from east to west. And each one of those palm fronds at the base can hold up to a gallon of water. On the left, in front of us, this is Perry Court, a military installation in Key West since 1833. First the Army, then the Navy, then the Coast Guard. The Navy has been here for every war, from the Civil War all the way through Afghanistan. See on the right, a yellow building with a metal roof and American flag. That was an armory built by the federal government in 1900. By 1959, it was falling apart. They gave it to the city. With the Navy's help, we turned it into the studios of Key West, supporting the fine arts and the performing arts in that very building. We had a good show going on there tonight. On the right here, this is called the Conch Cruiser. This one is dedicated to the studios of Key West. Speaking of dedications, I'd like to give my little hats off to the Navy for helping us fix up that building. Many of the houses in Key West, up yard sale, somebody else has got to drive. Oh well. Where was it? Oh yes, many of the houses in Key West were not built by house builders or designed by house architects. They were built and designed by ship's craftsmen and carpenters. So you'll see lots of different styled houses all over the island. That shook me up. Designed by people from all over the world. But as I say that, all those houses have one thing in common, and I'm going to share that with you in just a moment. Now we're turning into a quiet little neighborhood called the Meadows. Number of different styled houses here, but as I said, they all have one thing in common, and that is they all have metal roofs. In 1886, the worst fire ever to hit Key West started at 2 o'clock on Duval Street, raged on for 12 hours, destroying over 50% of the structures on this little island. The flames got so intense, people got into their boats and went out into the harbor. While out there, they noticed that a lot of the flames would skip over the houses that had metal roofs and go right for the ones that had wood roofs. So they made it a law that all the houses in Key West had to have metal roofs. Another good reason is for the capturing of water in those cisterns. Water's a lot cleaner coming off of a metal roof than it is off of a wood roof. In 1940, the U.S. Navy built a pipeline to the from the mainland all the way down to Key West, giving us for the first time a year-round supply of fresh water. Now those cisterns are used as swimming pools, jacuzzis, and just holding tanks in times of drought. Look at these dark red flowers on the left. They're called bougainvillea. The flower itself is the little white dot that you see. Those leaves that are red turn red and then they fall off the tree. The flower is the white dot. Now, we've got a neighbor not feeling well around the corner, so I'm going to be off the mic for the next block and a half. I'll be back with you. This doesn't come easy. I'm a natural born talker, and it's tough for me not to. Never end. On the right, you look behind this white picket fence. If you're in the back, look on your left behind this white picket fence. House built by Joseph Russell. Ring a bell? No? His working name in town, Sloppy Joe? That was his house right over there. When he built it, he had a view of the bay. This is the intersection of 7 presidents. Truman Avenue to the right, Eisenhower Drive to the left. No, we're on Eisenhower Drive. That's Roosevelt Boulevard to the left. There's a Lincoln dealership, there's a Ford dealership, and a couple of bushes over in the park. Everything to the left is Newtown, Key West. That was made by the Navy dredging up marl, a combination of sand, seashells, and coral rock. They literally doubled the size of the island by doing that. Once they realized the damage they were doing to the ecology, they stopped. One of nature's ways of adding land mass is through these trees you see on the left. Those are called red mangrove trees. They grow in salt water. They have a deep root system that grabs branches, leaves, and twigs, anything floating by. Several of the Florida Keys were made by a couple of red mangrove trees getting together and forming a landmass. On the right you see a sculpture of Jose Marti. He was a Cuban freedom fighter, revolutionary, and poet. He wrote the lyrics to the song Guantanamera, and for all those of us old enough, he was Cesar Romero's grandfather. Handsome man with a pencil-thin mustache. He was the Joker on the TV series The Batman. This is the largest park in Key West. It's called Bayview Park. It's got everything any park on the mainland would have, with one exception. No squirrels. There are no squirrels in Key West. Yeah, lots of nuts. No squirrels. Now, before this was a park, this whole area from back there to the next corner was a private piece of property owned by a man named Eduardo Gatto, very successful cigar manufacturer. He had a house located approximately where that blue children's playground is. Well, in 1889, the city of Key West came to him and said, "We'd like to buy your property and turn it into a park." He said, "No problem, I'll sell it to you." They said, "Just one thing, we don't want your house, we can't use it." He said, "No problem, I'll take it with me." When it came time to move, he jacked up the house, put it on rollers, hitched it to 2 mules, that's the key part of the story, and moved it to its present location, which I'm going to share with you. It's the beige building on the right with the white shutters. Take a look down the side to see how big it actually is. 2 mules. It took them 2 weeks to do it. 2 weeks. What a job they had to wake up to every morning. In 1890, he donated the house to the Cuban community, which turned it into a hospital, naming it the Mercedes Hospital after his wife. She drove a Plymouth, but that really had nothing to do with the story. This was back then, and it is today, a Cuban neighborhood. There are Cuban cafes like Sandy's, there's Cuban bakery here, and Cuban stores. And every so often, when you drive down this street on a Saturday afternoon, much like today, you can hear a little Cuban music. Ay, ay, ay. Now, as I mentioned, there's a Cuban bakery here. Cuban bread looks very much like French bread, except it's made with no preservatives. So if you don't eat it the first day, forget about it. It's going to be hard as a rock. Also, I must warn you about Cuban coffee. It's called Buchi, B-U-C-H-I. It comes in a cup about this big. It's very, 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 one more, very strong coffee. I'll give you an example. Let's say you're driving your car, you start drinking some Cuban coffee, you may find yourself running alongside the car you're driving. That's how strong it is. Some people like it with milk and sugar. It's called con leche. You look on the right, you see that tiger was made by the Key West High School welding shop class out of old automobile parts. Even the teeth are automobile spark plugs. Now, you probably weren't on the island very long before you heard the term conch. Conch is pronounced K-O-N-K, like a conch on the head. That's how it's pronounced. It's spelled C-O-N-C-H. I'm holding up next to me a conch shell. A conch is a large snail-like animal that lives inside the shell. It is good eating. Conch fritters, conch chowder, and conch salad are 3 of the ways it's prepared. Also, if you were born on the island of Key West, you're considered a conch. If you lived here for 7 years, you're called a freshwater conch. The name of the high school baseball team are the Fighting Conchs, and if you ever tried to get one out of a shell, you can see where they got that name from. My favorite conch story goes back to April of 1982. The federal government put a blockade on the overseas highway. That's the only road in and out of the Keys. They put it on the northbound side, right at the mainland, stopping. Well, what they were trying to do was stop illegal aliens and contraband from getting to the mainland. What they did was stop commerce from coming to Key West and the other Keys, because the blockade, they were being so thorough, they were stopping every car and it was taking hours to get through the blockade. Nobody wanted to deal with it, so cars stopped coming here. The mayor of Key West contacted the federal government and said, "Hey, you're killing us down here with this blockade. Not only is it illegal because we're part of the United States, but you're choking off all the commerce." The federal government said, "Deal with it." The mayor said, "I'll deal with it all right, bless you." He said, If you're going to treat us like a foreign country, we'll act like one. So what does he do? He forms the Conch Republic. He then secedes from the Key West, the Conch Republic, from the United States of America. He then declares war on the United States of America. 4 guys armed with a bag full of stale Cuban bread march down to the naval base, start throwing over the fence at naval officers. When they ran out of bread, they surrendered, ending the war. The mayor then asked for $1 billion in foreign aid. Well, he didn't get the foreign aid, but the government got so embarrassed by the negative publicity that they dropped the blockade. So if you see a Conch Republic flag, and I'll hold one up, but you'll see them around town, on the bottom it says, "We seceded where others failed." And we celebrate that every April 23rd for about 2.5 weeks. In front of us, the White Street Fishing Pier. In front of that, the Key West AIDS Memorial, built in 1997. On the left, that flat body of water is the Atlantic Ocean. There's a coral reef 5 miles out to sea. The large ocean waves smash against that. By the time they get here, they're non-existent. That coral reef runs from Miami down to the dry Tortuga Islands 200 miles away. More about that in a minute. On the left, this is one of the 3 Civil War forts that I mentioned. This one is the West Martello Tower. Now get this, it was started construction in 1861. 1862, it was declared obsolete. So the Navy used it for target practice, then turned it over to the Key West Garden Club, who's had it ever since. They conduct free tours. This is called Hicks Beach. It has free parking, which is kind of a nice touch. That water is very shallow, and the water temperature is about 84 degrees. Anytime the water temperature drops below the mid-70s, you'll see locals in the water wearing layers of bathing suit. Now, when you don't have large waves hitting the shore, you don't have replenishment of sand. You have to get your sand from somewhere. We get a lot of our sand from Miami Beach. So even though we're in Key West, you can tell folks you were on Miami Beach. Now look, if you look out there, look how shallow it is. You're out there 50 yards, it's not even up to the top of their bathing suit. Now the most influential man in Key West history is not that guy over there. It's not him. It's a man named Henry Flagler. He was partners with John Rockefeller and Standard Oil. He built the East Coast Railway from St. Augustine to Miami. He then decided he wanted to build it all the way to Key West. Well, people called it Flagler's Follies. Said it couldn't be done because he had 38 miles of open ocean to go through. He started it in 1905. He completed it in 1912. The first train arrived in Key West January 22nd, 1912. That was 100 years and 5 months ago. Anywhere he built a major stop on his railway, he built a major hotel. On my left, the Casa Marina Hotel, completed in December of 1920. It's made with German concrete, which does real well around salt water. Those are Cuban barrel tiles on the roof. If you notice, the downspouts from the gutters on the roof go into the building. That's because there's a 750,000 gallon cistern underneath it. So whether you were a Carnegie, a Mellon, or an Astor, you were drinking rainwater like anybody else. Now directly in front of us, through the windshield, of course for the people sitting backwards, directly behind you, these are the Florida Straits. This is where the Atlantic Ocean meets the Gulf of Mexico. You can tell the difference between the two because the Gulf of Mexico has a slight accent. Also, there's salt around the rim. Now, of the 100 ships going by Key West every week, 1 or 2 would wreck on that coral reef, sending up this call all over the island. Wreck ashore. Wreck ashore. The first captain to get out to the wreck would be the wreck master. He was guaranteed a certain percentage of what was salvageable off the ships. Everybody on this island, either directly or indirectly, prospered as a result of what was salvageable off the ships. So much so that in 1856, Key West was the richest city in the United States per capita. The richest city. Everybody on this island had monogrammed sheets, towels, and silverware. It might not have been with their own initials, but that's really not the point. It was monogrammed. Now we know Native American tribes came through here. Hello, happy Saturday, everybody. We know Native American tribes came through here because they treated the island as a funeral island. In other words, they would bring deceased members of the tribes here, lay them on the ground, and then leave. So when the Spanish got here around 1500, they found this little island full of bones. They named it Cayo Hueso, which literally means Bone Island. Later on, the Spanish traded the island to the British for the island of Cuba. Whoa. The British came down here to see what they got. They only had Spanish maps. Sir, no parking there to the corner. Sir, hello, in the red Mustang. No parking there to the corner, thank you. Boy, he took that well, I thought. So when the British came down to see what they got in exchange, they only had Spanish maps. The captain says, does anybody here read Spanish? Nobody raised their hand. Then one guy said, well, I don't read Spanish, but yesterday I had a Spanish omelet for breakfast. The captain said, thank you. The captain said, perfect, you're in charge of translation. So, for no apparent reason, Cayo Hueso, Bone Island, became Key West. Whoa. Now we know Ponce de Leon came through in 1513 searching for the Fountain of Youth. He did not discover that, but he did discover the dry tortugas. Dry meaning very little rainfall, tortugas for all the turtles he found on the island.
So they called the place Cayo Hueso.
Now, between the early 1600s and the early 1800s, piracy was rampant around here. Commodore David Porter, with what he called his mosquito fleet, were able to go into the coves, chase the pirates out, and either sink them or send them packing, which he did a lot of. Now, coming up on the left, this is a Queen Anne Victorian home built between 1892 and 1896. It's called the Southernmost House. Thomas Edison did the electricity for this house himself. Because he lived in Fort Myers, so it wasn't that big a deal. What else can I tell you? It's one of only 2 houses in Key West that has a basement. Oh, and this was originally built as a 1-bedroom house. That 1 bedroom being on the 3rd floor. The owners, Dr. and Mrs. Vining Harris, were into ballroom dancing. The whole 2nd floor was a ballroom. The 3rd floor was where they slept. Now, it's still called the Southernmost House, but it hasn't been since 1949, when a woman writer named Thelma Strable built a house behind this beige wall on the left, 18 inches farther south than the southernmost house, making this, as that plaque says, the southernmost house in the USA. Now here we are. I'll go slow. This is the moment you've all been waiting for. Watch out, folks. Cars are coming. Look out, everybody. We are 90 miles from Cuba, 157 miles from Miami, 128 miles from the closest Walmart. We are 85 miles farther south than Brownsville, Texas, 375 miles farther south than Cairo, Egypt, and Hosni Mubarak, who's not doing that well. On the left, you see this fancy thing with the shrubbery on the other side. That is the Naval Air Station at Truman Annex. If you ever saw the movie Top Gun with the, poor Tom Cruise getting divorced, oh, enough about that. With the movie Top Gun with Tom Cruise, that took place in San Diego. This is the East Coast version of that. Navy fighter pilots are stationed here in Key West. They fly out of Boca Chica Key, which is 7 miles north of here. On our right, you'll see a yellow nondescript building. Look over that building, you see the glass roof or atrium. That is the Butterfly Conservatory. Hundreds of varieties of butterflies, all shapes and sizes, are flying around in there. It's really magnificent. If you like butterflies at all, I really recommend it. It's really cool. Now this is the southern end or the upper end of Duval Street. Most of the really heavy drinking and vomiting goes on at the northern end of Duval. This is more art galleries, lower key entertainment, a lot of nice cafes. Bless you. Boy, the Sneeze Factory is headed here. Ooh, for rent. Ooh. Now the first person to build a cigar factory in Key West was an Englishman named William Wall. He did that in 1831. By 1891 there were over 100 cigar factories on the island. On the right it says La Tida. That stands for La Teresa de Marti. Jose Marti stood on the second floor balcony May 3rd, 1883, made an impassioned speech to thousands of people on the ground about Cuba's need to get its freedom from Spain.
It is my dream. Every children might be an
Now this is a lumpy, bumpy intersection, so hold on to your stuff and loved ones, but not necessarily in that order. Nah, get that car out of the way. Get that car out of the way. Okay. How are you today?
If anybody's at the house at 4, we need to be Sandy.
So this at one time was called Gatto Village after Eduardo Gatto, who was the cigar manufacturer. He built all the houses, he built schools and grocery stores, all for his employees. There was even a trolley that ran right down the center of the street taking them to and from work. Now we're going to turn right onto Whitehead Street, named after John Whitehead, who was a shipwreck survivor, rescued off the reef, brought to Key West in 1819. He immediately saw the potential of this little island. When he got back to his home in Mobile, Alabama, he told his friend John Symington about it. John Symington bought the island of Key West for $2,000. It's a great story, but I'm going to save it for a little bit. On the left, you see the Key West Lighthouse, built in 1847. That's the lighthouse keeper's quarters. It took two families to run it 24 hours a day. 88 steps to the top, 112 feet over sea level. You can see the coral reef up there on a clear day, and I think this qualifies it. On the right, the Ernest and Paul. Sir, don't stand in the street. Sir, don't stand in the street. That's dangerous. Thank you. This was built in 1850. It's a French colonial. Thank you, sir. The only one on the island. It was built for a shipwrecking captain, Asa Tiffs. Pauline Hemingway's uncle purchased the house for them for $8,000 in 1931. But it was a wreck. It was a mess at the time. But Hemingway was quite prolific while he lived there. He wrote for Farewell to Arms, To Have and to Have Not, and The Snows of Kilimanjaro. If you're familiar with the stories of his six-toed cats, there are 22 descendants of those six-toed cats still living on the property. On the left, you see a white church with a metal roof. That was built by a freed Maryland slave as the first African-American church on the island. His name was Sandy Cornish, very successful man, moved to Key West. That's the Eye of God stained glass above the front door. On the right, this is the oldest bar in Key West. It's called the Green Parrot. It was opened in 1890. The building itself was built several months earlier as a grocery store. Quickly they realized people in Key West would rather drink than eat. Oh boy. So they turned it into a bar. It's been a bar since then. No squirrels, lots of nuts. On the left, this is called Jackson Square, named after Andrew Jackson, the 7th President of the United States, the first military governor of the Florida Territory. There's some more roosters. Uh-oh, never mind, don't watch them. They're up to no good, I can tell. Look at this tree behind the end of the rainbow sign. That's a K-pop tree. The seed pods of that were used as flotation devices and life preservers all the way through World War II.